All right, welcome back to Beyond the Court with League One Volleyball, where we deep dive with some of the top coaches and leaders in volleyball and beyond. I'm your host, Courtney Thompson, and we all know that a great coach will challenge their athletes to find their best in all areas of their game, while also helping to inspire and motivate them in ways that go far beyond the court. Today, we are so lucky to be joined by Tom Black. Tom is one of my favorite people in the volleyball world. He was my setting coach on the USA team for many years, so we share a ton of history and a lot of moments that I am incredibly grateful for. Tom has coached as the head coach at Loyola Marymount University, as an assistant on the USA team. He then took over the Canadian national team program for a few years and is currently the head coach at the University of Georgia. He is a brilliant mind in the game of volleyball and an even better person, even though he gives me a ton of shit constantly. I always love our conversations, and I'm so grateful to get to talk with you today. Tom, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Court. Honored to be on it. You're like family to me, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
Yeah.
But no, honored to be on this and excited to dive into it.
That's awesome. And for all listeners, just know there's going to be a lot of shit talking on this call. There always is with Tom and I. As I mentioned in the intro, we go way back. Tom was my setting coach on the USA team, so he has seen me at my best, and he has seen me more often at my absolute worst. And he's been in it with me throughout all of it. So, Tom, just to start, can you share a little bit of how you got to where you are in your career? Maybe the highlights that stand out to you.
Yeah, I don't have highlights, but I think my career is kind of rare in terms of I've been like at every single step. I mean, I started as an assistant high school coach, became a head high school. Then I was a head junior college coach, coached a lot of boys and girls club. Then went to assistant men's at USC. Got my first head university job in my alma mater for UCS San Diego, which was D2 at the time. Then got a head coaching job, Division I at Loyola Marymount, assistant USA, where I met you. Somehow I survived that.
Made it out alive.
Yeah, somehow. And came here to Georgia and was able to, be the head coach for Canada Women for, a year and a half before COVID hit. So it's just been like incremental step by step, which is, I think, is getting increasingly more rare because Division I has gotten so big. It's easier to jump right into a full-time college job. But
yeah,
my route was it was maybe 10 years before I even got to the college level. So just like really, yeah. So I don't know what highlights are in there, but I think it's kind of what's maybe like distinctive about my career. It's not as common anymore.
Were you hoping to coach in college? Was that like a dream, or were you just chasing kind of the next best thing?
No, I think, I caught the coaching bug right away. I was lucky enough to work under a really legendary high school coach. He really didn't know much about volleyball, but he was like a great leader, just a great leader. And then when I left him and got my own high school program, that's when I decided I want to coach college.
What stands out to you as the biggest differences between like a club level, college, and national team? And then, or what are the through lines that you're like, these are kind of across the board?
Oh, what's consistent with all of them?
Yeah, maybe the biggest difference and what's consistent.
Well, I think what's consistent with all of them is like at the end of the day, I mean, you gotta know what you're teaching, and you gotta care about the people around you, and you gotta be good every day. I think that's consistent. The differences. I mean, like I'll just go for the low hanging fruit, but the obvious difference in college and club is the time that you have to spend in it. For me, it's a little more interesting with the difference to me between pro/international and college. I'm painting with a broad brush, so this doesn't apply to everyone, but
Sure.
I do think in college, I think actually any level below professional, I think you have to get the relationship to get to the task, and
Yeah.
I think at the highest level, you can't have a relationship unless you have the task. Like, so I think at the highest level, I mean, I don't think every player is intent. Some players are doing it intentionally, but I think every player, even if it's subconscious, they're like, you better make me better or you're out. And I don't think it's like that at any other level. I think every other level is like, do you care about me? Okay, then I'll listen. But
Right.
but I think what I found, like as soon as USA, like if the players trusted that I could make them better, then we had a relationship. And if
That's so good.
But
That
if we
feels very
didn't,
true.
if they didn't trust that, even if we had a relationship, it wouldn't have been worth anything. Where I
Yeah.
feel like you can even go down to college, and I think if you have a good relationship with a player, they'll give you all sorts of leeway in terms of like how good you can make them better. But that to me is a really distinctive difference, which I actually for my personality, that worked out really well, but
Right.
I could see it not working out great for everybody.
Yeah. I One thing I always appreciated about you is that you would ask and you know you'd ask questions of how you're doing and you would lean into kind of the emotional side of it, but then you would quickly get to like out of the narrative. So if I was ever lost in this story of like I'm never going to do this or whatever, you
Mm,
would like honor it, but then very efficiently go, "Okay, well what are we going to do?"
yeah.
Like let's move through this. And we had we were in it like every day for so long. And then when when I retired and you started doing other things, we would meet like once a year over a beer after a clinic and just kind of like catch up on it all.
One beer,
And
always. Let me
one,
stop. Hard
only
stop.
one. That's we won't mention. Yes. All right. And my there's one time in particular that you were like, yeah, like things have been shifting for me and my approach is a little bit different.
Mm.
So can you just share like kind of the arc of your career? What were the big shifts in your approach to culture, communication, how you teach?
It's hard not to talk about these things and not generalize on some level, but I think most coaches do value the relationship more than the task. And, and that's probably a healthier way to be. I've always been the other way. Like I've been about the task and then the rest. So I think for that reason, I think the international pro level has always kind of clicked easier to me because I think everybody's like that. And
Right.
I think because like the task has been so all important, that's allowed me to get to the relationship easier than it has like for me for lower levels.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of why I appreciate you saying that, but I think that's part of why like I was so about the task and the players were so about the task at the international level. And I had so much compassion for like how much pressure was on you guys because it was just so obvious,
Yeah.
and I had so much respect for how hard it was that we were trying to do. So it was just, I think because that's it just made it easy for me to get the relationship just a lot easier than I could at different levels.
Yeah.
It wasn't because I didn't want to be about that. And, it was just something about that environment just made it just clicked with me. So I think I was able to do that with like, with you and the setters and stuff like that. But I was not as successful in the lower levels and I think because it flips, it's more like if the relationship's good, then I'll listen to the task. And that's not how I've been wired at all. So it really kind of came to a head in the COVID years here. So everybody had adversity with COVID. I think the adversity that we experienced, we had more turnover and people that are getting quarantined and rosters than anyone in the conference. So
Oh
we
wow.
got to, the only reason I'm bringing that up, I think we got to a point where there was no way with the volatility that we're having that we're going to get any wins, So it was like a very low number of wins.
Yeah.
So we got to a point where I was coaching the way I had always been coaching. And, we all know this, like people were changing in real time, like especially the younger generation within that. So meanwhile, I'm being kind of taskmasterish, not even because I'm intentionally doing it, but just because that's how I've done it. And I was
Yeah.
wired that way. And that's the problem with blind spots, right? We don't see them until we see them, and then it's,
So you're slapped
so
with them.
yeah, big time.
Yeah.
So we're losing games. I'm basically coaching too hard on them. I think my default was like, I'm going to drag you through this if I have to. And, maybe that, you know,
I remember. I
yeah.
remember. No.
So maybe that worked pre-COVID when kids had a
Yeah.
social balance and a buffer, but COVID stripped all that away. And it's basically like, most college kids, like, you're going to stay in your room until practice. Then you're going to come into practice, and then you go right back in your room. So they're getting really isolated and really fragile. And I'm not being very warm and fuzzy during that time. And so things just came crashing down, and it spilled into my personal life too. Everything was just kind of rock bottom. But I
Yeah.
knew that, wow, I'm going to get fired, and I'm not in a good personal space either. It was just kind of one of those moments. So the first thing I was worried about was kids transferring, So I
Yeah.
just, usually I let people breathe a little bit before we have our end of the year meetings, but I had them right away because I knew, like, if the kids don't say what they're upset about, like, I'm going to lose all of them. So I just had 3 days of just getting bam, bam, you just punch in the face, right? I remember one kid wrote a 3-page letter about just
Oh.
what an awful human I was, and so I was just kind of listen. We've all had
Stuff.
that. That's
Yeah.
part of coaching. But through that, I think through that process and trying to keep people together and trying to be better, and a lot of the professional blind spots, I could see how they carried over into my personal life also, and so that was even more motivating.
Oh yeah.
And I think, like, for anyone as we meet these moments, like, I knew that's who I was being, but I knew that wasn't who I was, and I was really motivated to fix that gap. It'd be one thing if I was doubling down, but I just like that's not at all who I believe myself to be. Even though I'm fully owning, I did that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I was just really motivated to change, and I think there's been a big change since. I just obviously it's a process. I got a lot of work to go. I'm always going to be more task motivated. Always. I do. I think the grounding thought as we went into that next year, I was very aware if we don't have a good year, I'm not going to be here anymore. And I think the grounding thought I was having based on the previous year was like, okay, if everything bottoms out and I'm let go, what do I want the people in this room to have felt with this experience with me? And
Oh, wow.
but that really anchored me. I felt like whenever I got back to that thought, like the noise went away because like, yeah, all this stuff might happen. It might go bad, but like this person, like what do I, it's kind of that tombstone. What do you want on your tombstone?
Yeah.
Like what's the final thing I want this person to say about our relationship together? And that really grounded me. And it's kind of stayed with me ever since. So again, this is a process and it's never over. And I need to be aware of how I'm wired and where that's going to take me. But
Yeah.
but that was a pretty pivotal year for me. Yeah.
If someone was in your gym, what would they notice is the biggest difference between you maybe now and like 10 years ago?
Well, I think especially you who like coached me 10 years ago. I think if you're in my gym a lot, you'd be like, he's going to lose it. He's going to lose it.
The water's boiling.
Yeah.
Take off the lid. Take off the lid.
And then like right when you cringe, I'll probably say something a lot more measured and thoughtful. You'd be like, whoa,
Right.
okay.
That's so
That's probably
good.
the biggest difference you would say, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious.
And then you'd probably be resentful that they didn't get what you got.
We had some awesome moments. What's ironic about that is that I was in thinking of talking with you. Like one of my painful but favorite memories of us was I was like floundering, not making rosters. Like I wanted to quit. I was just on the national team for, I don't know, 4 years and like not ever playing with the number one team and like trying to be a good teammate, but felt like a mascot. And actually, no, this was after London. So I barely made the London team. And right after was like, or was this World Cup? I'm confusing the years now. That's how long ago it was.
Just, if you tell me the story, I'll remember it.
All right. It was a moment when I was floundering and you after practice came over and was like, dude, what is going on? And I was just like, I got no chance. Like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Why am I here? And you were like, yeah, Court, I think you thought when you had a little bit of success in this arena, like you'd be there. And I love you, but that's not you. It's maybe not anyone, but definitely not you. And he's like, you got to just keep jabbing. Like you had one knockout punch and then you put your gloves down. Like you don't have that luxury. Like you just got to keep being you, keep going, keep going. Yeah. And that has been like a voice for me for a long time since.
That's cool. I think the reason you're having a hard time placing is because we had that talk a couple times.
That's fair.
No,
that
we did. It was,
fair.
I remember the first roster of the Rio Quad that you didn't make after you'd just been a silver medalist.
Okay. Yeah.
We had that talk and then World Cup, which was really brutal. I remember like, hey, remember that talk? Like,
Yeah, we're still there. Put your gloves back up.
It's hard. I mean, and it's hard. I think it's hard for anyone in that environment. It's doubly hard for you because I mean, you had so many things just stature wise against you, like just like you're born how you're born, height wise, and and so it's doubly hard for you to be in that gym as long as you have and to come out with 2 medals is unparalleled, just unparalleled, and you could not have done it without your will. But I'm really grateful for those moments because it's really easy to write a song about the 2 gold, the 2 Olympic medals. But like, I mean, I'm really privileged that I got to see how hard it was for you and that just makes it better because you really did pick yourself off the ground. I'm super grateful for seeing that and what it really takes. And I've always taken that with me. I mean, we talk about how hard it is, but to actually live through those moments, like, oh, that's how hard it is. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the stories I tell a lot, I want to talk about feedback a little bit to pull on this string of, because this is also like so much of your relationship with a player is how, how these conversations go, how you get into them, when do you support, when do you challenge. But there was 2 things that stand out to me. One, you were the first coach to ask questions. And you, at one point, it was the first year I think you were coaching us setters and we'd get, hours of reps. And you'd be like, how'd that feel? How'd that feel? And I'd kind of be in it. And then one day I was tired and pissy. And I like doubled the ball. And you're like, how'd that feel? I was like, it felt like shit. How the hell do you think it felt? But you helped us like, become more aware so that we could have agency over it. And then the other memory I share a lot is we had a college setter in the gym, and me and Alicia and like a few of the older setters were like, "Oh, who's this? Whatever." And we were working on like a knee drive, and she set it over the net by like 10 feet. We're aiming for the hoop. And we were like, we all was like giggling, like we're kind of talking shit. And you were like, yes, yes, yes. Like your whole energy changed. You're like, that's what I'm talking about. Did you feel that?
Yeah.
And it's such a cool way to like help the athletes stay on process
Yeah.
when all we want is outcomes. So sorry, that was a big share, but like, how do you think about feedback, and what would be your best advice to coaches when it comes to feedback?
Keep it short, keep it visual, and check for understanding. I think maybe those would be kind of my bullets. I don't know where you want me to go with this, but maybe I should stop there. Like, where do you want me to go?
No, I got no agenda. I'm just curious because you were one of the first to do it. I think a lot of coaches do that now or try to
Hmm.
help the athlete like actually process rather than like tell me what to do. I'm just gonna react like a robot.
I think it was easy for me at that point because I think one thing I was struggling, like I said, I think a lot of it comes from how like high task I get. I think like the higher the level of the player and the higher the investment level of the player, the more you can really guide them. Like versus like, which is
Yeah.
kind of the space I like being in because you're the one who has to do the learning, not me. I mean, I'm going to learn along with you, but really what I'm going to be learning about, I'm going to learn about like what you look like when you're struggling or when you're not struggling and how well I'm teaching you, but you're the one who's got to do it. So it was kind of like a comfortable space because like the lower level you go and the lower level investment of the player, you'll get way more like deer in headlights when you ask questions. You're like, oh, okay, let's back up. All right. So when I'm asking you a question, I'm trying to like, like you don't have to do that as much
Right.
with so it's kind of a fun space to be in. And I liked when you guys got frustrated. I just thought that was hilarious, because it was just trying to tell me like, well, I mean, I would always check like, should I have asked a question then? But also, that's kind of your breaking point. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
let's get to it now, so you have confidence later, right?
Right.
And you got that. I mean, I know you remember too, but you got to the point where you're like, I'm frustrated. Give me a minute, and then
Yeah. I'm gonna try to
you do
front load
you,
this
you
and
do a
having a
little laugh,
day.
and
That's right. God, the hours we spent setting
yeah.
into a hoop. I shared one story about how you helped me through like a tough time many times. But when you have an athlete that say is like super frustrated or kind of not really getting better or going through a hard time, what is your lens? Like, how do you try to help them?
I think the like where the conversation goes is always different, and that's kind of like generally is pretty rewarding. But I think I always start with, hey, like I think you're capable of this. This is what I'm seeing, and then from there, like I just really try to make sure I'm not assuming anything. So it's like that's your time to tell me what's going on, really. So I mean, most it'll look pretty similar. Like, hey, like, well, I'll usually be like, tell me about X, whatever it is. It's kind of indicating there's a problem. And that's generally your feedback loop, right? Either the person's like, "This is what's happened," and that like meets what you think,
Yeah.
or they're like, "What?" And that's always going to be a little harder because they're like defensive at that. That's just telling you the defensive, right? Or they're defiant, which I think is like the least common thing, where they're like, "I did this and I think it was great," and shut up.
Right.
That hardly ever happens. But yeah, it's just tell me about that, and then that's kind of your feedback for are they with you or not, and like wherever they are in those three answers, like, okay, well, I saw this and I think you're capable of this, so tell me what's going on. And then I feel like once we get to that part, like tell me what's going on, then I think it's pretty good at that point. It's just listen to them and figure it out together. And
Yeah.
I rarely meet a kid who's like, I don't like that you want me to be better. I really don't like that. Like
Yeah.
it's like so once you can get them to agree. I had a really good Anson Dorrance, the famous coach at
Oh yeah.
UNC soccer. He said he was always really good about his time whenever he was able to get on the phone. But he said one thing that really stuck with me. He said once we address the problem with the player, I want to ally myself with her on that problem. And he's like, I never want to be an adversary to her on that problem. I want to be an ally.
Hmm.
And that really stuck with me. So like, here's the problem. Do you like it? I don't like it either. How do we solve it together? And I think once again, that
Wow.
once you can get yourself in that space, it's like, okay, well, I'm on your team. Let's go.
Yeah.
Maybe how to get there in the beginning. It's always a little bit different, but I think generally this is what I'm seeing. Listen to what they're saying. That tells you where they're at, and then
Yeah.
express belief, and then ask them again what they're saying, and kind of go from there. But
I love that. It makes it feel so much more collaborative.
that's the whole. I think once you get to that point, and that's where what Doran said that really stuck with me. Like that made so much sense to me because like yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want them to get worse. So like once we can identify the problem,
Yeah.
if I can put myself on the same team with them, then and because that's like I think that's part of what made our relationship so special is like how hard some of those moments were. And like we weren't even super pleasant sometimes in the beginning with each other, but like I think we always got there. Like we never left it
Yeah.
bad, and
Yeah.
we wouldn't have the relationship we did if we hadn't had those moments. So,
Yeah. Speaking of Anson, who are your other mentors that you look up to or have learned the most from?
yeah, I definitely respect him. I wouldn't call him a mentor just because
Okay.
I just didn't have enough exposure, but I definitely respect him. Well, my first mentor was the high school coach I talked about, Bob Ferguson, and he really kind of showed me how to lead a program. And it was really interesting too that he wasn't very technically savvy, but he knew that and he empowered people who were, but he still very much led the program. And that was a big takeaway for me. And then Ken Stanley at Pierce College is like really the first person to teach me how to coach, to teach me like what the science is behind this stuff, and like just really poured a lot of time into me. And then I met Carl McGowan, who's a big mentor for everybody, for the whole world.
Yeah.
Really, it's really still understated how much of an impact he's had on the game.
It's pretty wild.
So like thousands of other coaches, he just opened my eyes up to different level. And then Ron Larson became a big mentor because once I met Carl, Ron for like 5-6 years was the guy I was calling daily and kind of showing me how to apply it. And Carl would too, but I just didn't know him on the level that I was able to know Ron because he coached my alma mater at ECSD, and then he became the men's national assistant. And those were like kind of my core mentors for a long time. And then Jim McLaughlin, your coach, he definitely he's been a big resource for me too. Probably the best teacher, like in the moment teacher that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like we could talk about him and feedback all day long.
Oh my God, he's the
I think,
best.
I mean, I really think he's a savant when it comes to feedback. And I'm not this last guy. I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt of being a mentor because he doesn't deserve it. But he's one of my closest friends. But Jason Watson at Arkansas, I think he's brilliant. I think what he's doing with offense is just groundbreaking and just
In
the
what
best.
way?
He's very good. Well, I think Jason in general, he's very good at wrestling through very complicated things and coming out with like a really clear kind of metaphor idea about it. So I think what he's doing with like the setter hitter window and making it a cooperational skill, basically we got to get here together, and then kind of going from there. And he's just doing all sorts of really cool stuff. And the fact that he's taken so many complicated data points and made it so clear and simple and measurable is insane to me. So again, I'm not going to give him the satisfaction calling him a mentor. But I love that guy to death, and he's definitely someone I just talk to constantly now, and I'm always trying to keep up with him.
Shout out, Jason. This is his second shout out. Susie
That's
Fritz
enough.
was on.
That's enough.
Yeah, we're
That's
done
enough.
here.
I will say, anytime you want him and I to do anything together, we'll do it. We'll do it for free as long as we get to talk trash to each other and
I'm in
get
for
after
that.
each other. Yeah.
You heard it here first, guys. Part 2 coming. Jason Watson.
We'll do it. Yeah, we do it just to do it.
Are you open to sharing a story of when you had in the realm of fear of failure for athletes? Like it was happening in your gym at Georgia. You shared this with me over our first beer. Something about they were so worried about like not to miss, and you had them kind of write a story about the worst case scenario to almost free them up. Would you be open to sharing that?
Yeah. So another passion of mine is writing, like fiction, especially. And I had
that's free time.
Yeah, I just do it in the morning before my kids wake up. But I've got a great writing teacher, and like the first couple meetings, he had us go through the bad scene exercise. So this was all online, but I just stole it. But basically, he was like, okay, I don't know, there's like 100 people on the Zoom. He's like, I know none of you guys think you're going to make it. So just tell me all the reasons why you're never going to be a good writer. And it took a minute, but he had to get us out of it. So things started popping up in the chat. I'm too old. I'm not original. I'm not creative. I'm not smart enough. And he was like giggling as he was reading them. And you're like, and that part, like, I don't want to say I was mad because you knew there was a purpose, but you're kind of like, this guy's like, being kind of rude. I mean, he's
sure, yeah.
Like we're gonna spill it. And he's like, ha ha ha, like, this is good. And he's like, I really like that one. That's a great one. And just so then he was like, okay, so then he goes, okay, we're gonna put 5 minutes on the timer. You're all gonna write a scene, and before you start, I want you to write like someone who's never gonna make it. I want you to write like someone who's too old. I want you to write someone who's not creative. I want you to write like someone who's not. He just read all our reasons, right? And then he's like, okay, again, before we start. And then he read it all again. He's like, I want you to write exactly like that. And then he gave it to us, and then he started calling on people on random. And he didn't call me. I don't think he did, but but I remember the first guy he called, and this guy who was just like total beginner writer, he wrote this like detective noir 1940 scene. It's like, holy crap, like just this is so good. And
Really?
it was so good. And but like like we in the Zoom call, like we were all just like, oh my God, this guy. And but the teacher was just like, he was so like, I mean, he was very like positive about it, but you could tell it was, and then he
Yeah.
went through a couple more, and he's like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've never read a bad scene in this exercise ever. There's never been a bad scene.
Whoa, I just got
And
chills.
and
That's
he's like,
crazy.
what I did, he's like, I just took all those fears way back in your baby subconscious and I made you say them, and then the light dissolved it, and then he's like, and then who you actually are like came out, because you're not focusing on what you're so scared about. You're actually doing it.
Yeah,
It was like when he was talking it, I'm like, that's what a match is like. That's exactly what a match is like, And
totally.
so this is only when it worked once. I haven't been able to do it again because the element of surprise really matters in this.
Hmm.
So if anybody's listening to this, what I'm about to share, and they have some ideas of how to like continually do it, like please tell me, because I really struggled doing it more than once. So we were going into double days, and I told my assistants about it, and they were actually really supportive. I was feeling really vulnerable. I was like, I kind of
Yeah, I
shared
bet.
everything, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like way off the wall. So we were going into double days. We were doing just the way that I do double days. It's like each practice session is a skill until we've covered all of it. So we're going into serving, and I had it laid out. I had the whiteboards. I had initials on the back of the whiteboard. I had everyone with a marker because I just wanted to save time, and I had like all the balls lined up on the end line. So I'm like, okay, we're doing serving. Everyone come on up to the whiteboard. I'm like, none of you guys think you're going to be a good server in crunch time. I know you don't, right? And they just kind of looked at it. I'm like, you don't have to, you don't need to confirm it for me. I know that
Oh
you don't.
my
I'm
God.
like, I know none of you honestly want the ball on crunch time for an SEC. I know you don't. I'm like, and I know you don't because I've been doing this long enough to see it,
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, maybe some of you guys want to get set, maybe you want the ball, but none of you want to be serving for match point. I know you don't.
Oh shit.
And they're kind of, and I just kept saying that. I'm like, hey, it's okay. I'm saying, you're not saying it. I'm saying it. I'm telling you, like, and
Did
I'm like,
anyone
so
get like kind of like edgy of like I do?
no, I would have liked that, but
Yeah. Okay.
no,
All
but
right.
they're kind of giggly a little bit, and
Yeah. Sure.
that's a good point. I think if I was, like if we had like established success, I think for the point of the program, I was pretty
That makes
confident with
sense.
that.
Yeah. It
But
was early.
I would have picked something else. Like if we were like a constant Final Four team, I'd be like, I know none of you think we're or whatever, but
Right. Right. Right.
there's a breaking point for everybody. Like
Totally.
that's part of being human is the fear, right? So it's like, okay, I just made sure I made it safe enough. And I'm like, okay, so I have all your names back here and I want all of you. I'm like, we're going to erase it at some point. It's not going to stay up there. No one's going to know it. But I want all of you to write back there why you're not going to be a good server. Like just tell me
Oh
what you
my
were. I'm like,
God.
even if you think you're going to be a good server, there's a huge part of you right now that doesn't think you are, and we got it out. And then, so I did what my teacher did. I read it out. I'm like, okay, so you guys are going to go out there and serve. I want you to serve like someone who always chokes in big moments. I want you to serve like someone who can only hit the three seam and not the two seam. I want you to serve like someone who can only serve if nobody talks to them before a game. I read it, and then they went out and they just totally half-assed it. I'm like, stop! I'm like, get back here! And I read it again. I'm like, I want you to serve like this person. I'm like, that you are not serving like that person.
Oh.
And then they went back a second time, and I was feeling even more vulnerable than I was with the coaches. I'm like, God, if this doesn't work,
Yeah.
I am it. Like
Yeah.
this looks so stupid. And then our best player, like I think I got lucky with that. She literally served how she wrote it. So she like stepped, tripped, fell on her face, and like hit it off her fingertips
Oh
and kind of
my
like drove.
God.
And then like that just set the tone. And then it was like comedy hour after that. It was so, and like
Yeah.
everybody's laughing and they're doing it. And I'm watching it for a second, and then I'm like, stop. I'm like, okay, serve normal. And it was just bam, bam, bam. It was incredible. It was, I mean, that was the leap of faith, like kind of,
Yeah.
so it was just incredible. And so then I called them in. I'm like, honestly, how'd that feel? And they were like, that felt amazing. And we unpacked it. So we had the mantra going on. So we just called it bad and then air quotes X. So
Yeah.
people had license all day. Hey, we could do the bad drill. You could do the bad spike. You could do bad serve. So they would start calling it out. Like, hey, can we do a bad drill just for a couple seconds? And they would just like trip over themselves, and the people start
Oh my
laughing, and then
God.
we would just get into the drill, and we just did it all the time, and to the point, even like within a sixes drill, like someone would shank a ball, even if that wasn't anyone was focusing on, and I could hear players go, "Hey, that was my bad pass," and they'd be like, "Okay, fine," and then they would just move on.
Yeah.
But it was really powerful. It was now I haven't been able to replicate it on that level because the element of surprise is totally gone.
Totally.
But it was pretty magical, like that
That's so
year that it
cool.
happened. So if anyone is listening to this and is remotely fired up and has some ideas, I'm all ears for how to keep it going. But again, in the bigger lesson, obviously, is just, if you can speak, if you can bring the subconscious to light, the light will dissolve it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you guys still do the bad drill or even that as a practice or?
Uh, I'm trying. Again, it's just harder after the element of surprise. I think maybe like I'm curious, like when the people who did it first are no longer here, if I can get that element of
Right.
surprise back in.
Just wait and do it.
But I
Yeah.
do see a larger teaching principle in it. Like it has gotten me way more, um, my radar way more up of like, okay, is this a mechanical deficiency or is there fear happening? Because if it's
Right.
fear, it's not the mechanics, and so it's definitely something I've taken with me in real time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's like a pandemic of fear of failure across the country for
Nice,
young
nice one.
girls.
Nice quote.
Thank you. I'm like even, and I don't think it has to do necessarily with the level. I was at a club and it was like the 14 fives team, which means you've probably not played volleyball before. And the girls like didn't want to even like play six rotations because they were in so much fear about like messing up or whatever. So what's the antidote for you if you have a kid in your program or if you're coaching club that's like kind of stuck in that?
We could talk about this for hours. I'm pretty passionate about this. So the antidote is free unstructured play. That's the antidote. The solution is much more muddy, So I think like just in the story you shared, you just said 14-5. So if you're a 10, 11-year-old kid and you're on 14-5 and you're in a gym with 14-4 and 3 and 2 and 1 and your parents are watching you and your first exposure to volleyball is an organized club tournament where they're keeping score and there's professionals reffing, like what's the environment teaching you, and how are you supposed to not feel an intense fear of acceptance and approval? Like I don't, no matter how good the
Yeah.
coach is, right?
Yeah.
So, and the epidemic, I think, is this is part of it's to volleyball's credit to our growth, right? But I mean, you can't find me many girls that are just playing pickup for the sake of pickup,
God.
but you can find me tens of thousands of girls that are playing structured
Yeah.
volleyball on their numbered team that their parent drove them to, while other parents are watching. I mean, just everything, the stakes of the stuff is high. And you can see even clubs now, like, I mean, this is how it works, right? The colleges, like social media has been beefing up with colleges. Like there's like these incredible highlight reels coming and Instagram and the likes, and the girls are commenting on each other's. And it's like the
Insane.
peer pressure has never been higher.
Yeah.
Right. So what are clubs trying to do? They're trying to mimic that. Like we want to give them what the colleges are giving them. And that, this is me having a daughter in club volleyball and me really trying to deprogram a lot of this and not being as successful as I want to be. But one thing we had, and my wife too, like we've really tried to hammer into her is like, if you love this, you need to be doing it when you're not supposed to be doing it. Right.
Yeah.
And if you
I like
if you
that.
love this, then you need to get excited by mistakes and the fact that they're going to make you better. And like, I'm just telling you, like, I'm a coach and I'm talking about this, I'm aware, and it's still been a massive challenge to depro because it's not because she's around bad people at all. It's just the environmental incentives are so extreme on right
Yeah.
now, and they're so pervasive, and it's not anyone intentionally doing it, but that's where I think the answer is not as easy, because I do think clubs, most 99% of clubs are doing it because they love volleyball and they love kids. They're not doing it to make money, but they do have to make money. Like, they
Yeah.
do, you're right. So it's hard to just play pickup and charge people for that. How does that work? Right.
Right.
And it's hard for a kid just to play pickup and not go for the club. Well, then what team am I going to be on? Like, what, am I going to be on the fours
Yeah.
again? And so I don't think the answer is so simple, but I do think that's the answer. And if that's not the answer, then it's got to be. Like that, I would think.
It's like kind of sad that it's overwhelming to think of changing it at the club level.
I think it's doable. Like, I think it's really cool. Some of the clubs are doing, like, there's John Mayer on Coach Who Brings Out. He's been interviewing Jesse, the club director in San Diego, does the big fours tournaments. And that's like a huge part of their club,
Oh yeah.
where everyone's playing different positions and stuff. And I feel like that's a really good compromise of like, okay, like you're going to play in a club in a structure, but here's like a pretty fun, unstructured, generalized way to play the game where you really are kind of playing like a cool pickup game. So I think there's like middle ground solutions for sure that just end up making the kid a better player anyways,
Yeah.
right? So it's,
With the freedom and the awareness of like, how are we solving this problem? Not like, what do we do next? Where do I
right.
stand? What do I, yeah.
This is something, like, no matter how structured it gets, I think we can be very intentional about it. Like, what are the pockets where we're demanding independent thought, like not asking for it, we're like demanding it. And that is so important for kids. I mean, it's important for everyone, but man, if you're not giving the kids that period of time where you're demanding it, like now you're expecting it when they're 18 and then the Big Ten or the SEC and like, I mean,
Yeah.
so it's I think the unstructured play, but again, if you're not doing that, I do think there's ways with our feedback being really intentional where we can like demand independent thought, we can demand creativity, we can demand pattern recognition, we can demand problem solving,
Yeah.
and no matter how structured the environment is, and the kid will benefit so much from that. Yeah.
To keep pulling on that, what is the one thing, let's say for college, what's at the essence of what you hope everybody in your program would get if they played for you for 4 years? Like, what's the one lesson that you feel most strongly about?
Yeah, I mean, I feel this one, but I want them to have a playbook for the next hard thing. That's the
Oh,
most
that's
important thing.
awesome.
It's going to mean something different to everyone, but I want them to know this is how I did it in my college volleyball experience. So this is how I'm going to attack that job that not quite sure I'm good enough for. This is how I'm going to attack being a parent. I've never been a parent before. How I'm going to attack that marriage, man. I haven't dated more than 6 months to anyone before. Now I'm going to
Yeah.
marry, like, I mean, just like
Yeah.
just over, but okay, that's how I felt in college, and it's
Yeah.
I want it to be that nothing makes me feel better than that. One of my best moments ever as a coach is there was a kid who played for me here, and she called me the next year, and she wasn't a hedge fund manager, but she was in that kind of she wanted to be that, and she was in that group, and she goes, "Hey, I was in a meeting and we were stressing about profits, and some light bulb came on, and I go, hey, people, we're here and we need to be here and we're in the gap and it's confusing and it's going to be hard, but are we going to chicken out or are we going to get in there? Because the only way to get through that is to get through the gap. We're in the gap. And I was almost crying. I'm like,
Let's go.
how much better does it get than that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I want them to have a process for the next hard thing.
There was like 4 months ago, I was kind of in, like, works a lot. It's so fun and meaningful, but it's like pretty gnarly and some personal life stuff. I got a good friend going through, just like everything was just felt hard. And I like had a moment and I was like, dude, I'm getting my ass kicked right now. And then I was shaping kind of a talk with coaches and I was like, what do I actually want to say? Like, I'm kind of bored of the stuff I always talk about. And it's exactly that. I was like, I was fortunate to play volleyball as long as you can, at least as far as you can, at level wise. And yet the things that I'm most grateful for are like building community, the ability to like be a good team player, ask for help when you need it, show up for people. And then just to get your ass kicked and know how to get up. I was like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the benefit of not quitting, right? I mean,
Yeah.
especially as you get older, you're like, if I don't quit, there's a better time waiting for me. I just gotta keep going,
yeah.
right?
Yes. And then you need people to remind you that, because often we're knuckleheads, or at least I am.
Yeah, you are, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of being a knucklehead, we were having a conversation earlier this week, and we were talking about the cost of high performance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things Dr. Michael Gervais says that has stuck with me is like, man, if parents really knew what it was like for people at the top of their game and what that experience was like for them, they wouldn't push their kids that hard. So for you and all of your experience, I mean, you've coached national teams, pro, like college, club, all the things. What do you think the cost is of teaching someone to be in the overdrive and the competitive nature of high performance?
I don't know if it's, I think the cost of high performance, I think where it really started hitting me, and I know this is not unique to volleyball because I hear about it in the NFL and other sports, but I was seeing people come out of the national team, and this is over multiple coaches, so this is not any one coach or anything.
Yeah.
This is the experience of being in a national team. It's
Yeah.
like really important. Just kind of like a husk of themselves, like nothing left. Like like arguably, like
it's so
like
sadly true. Sorry, that's a funny way to say it.
Not everyone, but a lot. Like
Yeah.
like arguably worse for the wear. And and that. I think any coach and player that goes through that process can attest. Like you just get such a tight bond with people. Not everybody, but definitely. You can attest to this even more than me. But there's been a lot of lifelong relationships out of this because it's just so intense. So
Yes.
so when you see people so just beaten after, it's like that's not great. I don't want that, and I know they don't want it either. So that's always kind of stayed with me for a bit, and then just kind of going through my own journey. I mean, and you know more about this, and Mike knows more about it than both of us together, but I mean, I'm not saying anything psychologists don't know, but I think a lot of what leads to a high performer is, the splitting from something earlier in your life, and you split so hard that you have a gear you can go that most people couldn't go to even if they wanted to. They just can't. But I think a lot of high performers, not every high performer, I do think there's some high performers, which is kind of what we want, who are doing it for the love of it. It's very
Yeah.
intrinsically motivated. It's a part of who they are. They feel balanced. They feel invigorated by doing it.
Yeah.
That's what we want. But I think there's a massive proportion of people who are not like that. And they're actually high performers because they can bury so much of themselves
Right.
and keep going at a level of self-inflicted pain most people just wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to teach that or understand that or even appreciate it if you don't have it.
Totally.
But I think you get in a high performance environment and everyone's like, oh, I get it, I get it, I get it, right? And I think the challenge though is as we learn a lot of high performance psychology and you learn like the tricks of the trade and all this stuff, it's developing that split that's allowing you to grind, and it's keeping the other part of you buried. And I think that's where the cost comes in, because we all know this, like that's just the shadow, right? And the shadow's going to come out, and
Yeah.
if you're not attending to it, it's going to come out in very, very bad ways. So if we're not attending to the shadow, we're just building up that part of us that's driving us anyways. I mean, we can come out of it really, really crippled. And I think that's where your relationship starts suffering, and
Yeah.
we have to look at habits that we just kind of like didn't want to look at. Now they're hitting us in the face, and it's just all sorts of stuff. And that to me is the cost of high performance. And it sucks. And it doesn't have to be that way. But I think the hard part with it is, I think, I'm not saying anything people don't know, and I'm not saying anything people even aren't like trying to attack. I know there's like a lot of organizations trying to address this, but I think the challenge of it is like, what makes so many people a high performer run so deep and is so buried even to themselves, right?
Totally.
And the cost of bringing it out might be too disruptive to what they're
Yeah.
doing, because what they're doing is so hard, and that's where the challenge comes in, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And they're doing
So
it for a reason, probably to be okay.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like, yeah.
100%. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm curious how you see all of it. Yeah.
I don't know. I share a similar sentiment, but I was pretty shocked. I think my first quad of the national team, like seeing girls retire, or even I actually no. Before I got to the team, I just imagined naively that those women would be like so stoked on life and connected, and these communities and just happy and whatever. And I was like, oh, these guys are the folks that were like playing at the highest level and making the most money. Often it felt correlated that they weren't as happy. So probably some of it is a lot of that. I think the other interesting thing that maybe applies to like club athletes or like at every level is to be really great, you also have to learn this like override of I'm tired, but I'm going to get up anyway. Or I'm pissed at Tom Black for not playing me, but I got to be a good teammate anyway. Like, so
Yeah.
you're getting reps at kind of ignoring your like emotion or whatever, which not that we want to act in line with our emotion all the time, but because if you think of the ultimate competitors like Kobe, Michael, I think of those guys as just their own world. They're also deeply intuitive. And it's like wisdom, and they're like, oh no, everyone's doing this, but this is what's right for me. I'm going to do this. And I don't think we foster that very well in our culture.
The thing you said about emotion, I mean, that's something we're teaching constantly. And I think it's just kind of between what we just shared right now and me coaching college age girls, but having young daughters, I just think it's kind of come a little full circle for me personally. And just what
Yeah.
I've just digging deep into myself to try to get better. I mean, I'm trying to get more and more intentional about how that process works. So like, hey, you cannot help what you're feeling, right? But
Yeah.
that's not where it stops. All right. So like, okay,
Yeah.
so we're feeling something, not your fault. All right. Now,
Yeah.
like now, but I do think there's a prevailing wisdom. Like I'm feeling this, so I do it. And like, so we've talked about, and I got this from Mike. I'm like, no, that's what puts you in jail. Like that's literally how
Oh my
that's literally
God.
how felons think, right? There's like, no, like I think this and I do it. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and that's like, I got that from Mike. And, but okay, so we cannot help what we're feeling. It's actually some good data for us. There's a reason we're feeling it. Like now the muscle we got to build is awareness. Like, can
Yeah.
we catch that feeling and can we look at it? And then we get to make a choice. And like, so right now we're really caught up in the I'm feeling this stuff, and then we're not going any further with it. And that's
Right.
causing lots of problems because like she doesn't like you now and you don't like her. And I don't like coaching any of you guys right now, like, because we're just talking about our feelings and not going any further. So
Right.
it's like, I think it has to be really intentionally taught now. And I think a lot of it is a derivative of what you're saying over years and years and years. Like, well, I just feel like this. And then I wait for my parent or my coach to direct me.
Yeah.
And then I just go to my, my group chat friend group, and I'll talk about it there and just like rinse, repeat. And it's so unhealthy, right? So it's
Yes.
okay, I'm feeling this now. I got to build up on I got to own my ability to be aware of it. And that's life. That's lifelong, right? We can never get
Yeah.
too good at that. And
Amen.
then we get to make a choice, but we can't do that if we're skipping that awareness piece, right? So, and I
Yeah.
know, I'm beating the drum with you. Like you're teaching that every day to everybody, right?
No, I'm trying to do it.
Well, yeah,
So it
but
is like that. Yeah. I love that. And then where do you take them after that? So it's like values based. What's in alignment with your vision, with who you are, with your strengths?
I mean, I think it ties into the fear thing. I mean, like, so for us, we have three. I use buckets instead of values, but we have a learning bucket, a performance bucket, and a teammate bucket. And I think all there's like so much overlap to all this, but when talking about that fear story and like listing your fears, and I think that emotional loop works a lot like that. I mean, so I think a lot because we're talking about performance, right? Most of the time, it's like fear, and it could be fear manifesting in anger, it could be fear as fear, it could be fear as anxiety, whatever.
Right.
But it's the base of it, right? And
Right.
so it's the same thing with these emotions. Like most of the time we're talking about some kind of fear, like, either like I'm scared of what she's going to think of me. I'm scared what's going to happen to me next play. I'm embarrassed. I'm scared I'm going to look bad, whatever. So we teach it. It's really a big part of that mental skill. It can be like, sometimes, a lot of times it takes me forever just for them to label the emotion.
Totally.
I'm like, tell me what you're feeling right now. And I'm like, stop. I'm like, trust me, this is not a therapy session. Just tell me what you're feeling.
Yeah.
I'm like, and then we got to go from there. I'm like, do you see how you can't even tell me what you're feeling? And they'll be like, well, Sally did this and Mary did that. I'm like, tell me what you're feeling. And then we get to that. I'm like, okay, like now you're aware of it. Do you see how hard that was? I'm like, okay, now we gotta cultivate that. But now that you're aware of it, what would you like to do? Would you like to keep doing what you're doing, or would you like to do something different?
God, it's
And
so
then
good.
again, at that point, it gets easier, and it's
Yeah.
and it's really rinse repeat. It's just like volleyball. I mean, we got to teach. I mean, you know how it is. You got to teach it like 10,000 times. And
Yes.
but to me, it ties into everything. But it probably most ties into the performance bucket, because the more we can do that, like within ourselves, I can do little micro loops of that and reset myself for the next point and really
Yeah.
start. Because that's really what we're trying to do with performance. Like, can you spend as much time on your mind as you would your body? Can you get your
Mm-hmm.
mind in a state where you can let it, like, not that you hope you're going to let it rip, but like I can let it rip. And even if I didn't let it rip that minute, I can switch it right back.
Yeah.
Like, can you? Because I can. And then now you're starting to get confident, right?
Yeah.
And that's the end goal of where we're trying to go with it. So,
Totally. Dude, that got me all fired up.
Well, you were a master of that. You were incredibly good at that.
Thank you. It took, I don't know, I think it took a lot for me to play at that level, or like the stars had to
Yeah.
really align. So it was fun to compete, to try to like tap into that. But that just reminded me of like finishing video. You'd like slam our computer, be like, all right, what's our mindset tonight? What are we going to do? What are we going to be about? Like, let's go.
But you got to the point, and I'm going to say this because I hope other players do it. I mean, you were an expert at connecting your whole day to that mindset. Like an expert, and you're an expert in doing it in a motivating way. So like you had a checklist, and it started it probably started before this, but I know it started in your car, and you knew what you were going to play. And like, I would even get random text messages from somebody like, oh, this podcast, I'm doing this, I'm going to kick ass today. And I was just like, and I'm like driving, it's 7:15 a.m. I'm like, wow, she's ahead of me.
That's right.
But I'm sure you looked at the list of what you do every day, like, whoo, like I got to work today. But it was very intentional, and you woke up and you fell asleep every day. Like I crushed today. Like it might have gone well, it might have gone bad, but you knew that like stay the course. And so I mean,
Yeah.
and the reason I'm saying that, well, I want you to hear that, but also I hope there's some other players hearing this, because like you left nothing to chance. There's no one who saw you make the Olympic roster and be like, oh, I don't know how she did that. I mean, it was like everybody knew how you did that.
Oh.
So it was really cool for me to witness that.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you.
No, it was an honor for sure.
Yeah. What's it like been watching your daughter play? I know like you've played, coached at so many levels, and now she's in it. Like, what's that been like?
It's definitely made me a better coach for sure. I'm definitely grateful to like be her parents and then again coach, because she loves volleyball. She's super into it, so she wants to be a college player, which really kind of helps me knowing that because I am coaching college players and just to kind of see the correlation.
Oh
It
yeah,
helps me learn more about the college players too because I can kind of see how they behave and I'll trace it back to how they might have been at 12 years old, and I'll be like,
totally.
that's why this is happening. Okay, got it. And so it's been a really cool problem. And then she does things that just mirror me. I mean, I
Oh
think I
my
told you
God.
the story. There was 12-year-old, 12 and under tournaments, or no, sorry, she was 10 and under to start. So those aren't loud tournaments. There's like a bunch of little kids in the gym.
Right.
It's not like super loud. And it's the last tournament of the year, and she rotated out, and they're losing. And I just hear this little voice start screaming, "If you want to win, show it!" And like,
Oh my
so
God.
so my wife and I kind of look at each other and we know that's Kylan for sure. That's Kylan. Yeah. And then she just keeps going and keeps going
Shut
and
up.
I just like I'm like that's 100% my fault. That's just straight DNA right there. Like there's like we have never had a
Dude, that's
conversation
so
that
good.
remotely ties into that, but that's just her being like a crazy intense
Oh my
that
God.
so that was just DNA right there. I'm like, oh man, like your kids really do. They mirror back to you.
Dude, my cheeks hurt. That's so funny.
I was like, I just want you to know before what I say next that I could not respect that level of competitiveness more than I do. And she's like, okay. And I was like, but you can't make your teammates look bad. And she's like, all right.
Oh my God.
And she's like, but I didn't. I'm like, I know, but it did. It made them look.
Mm.
You can't do that. She's like, all right. So yeah,
I also back to that kind of high performance talk and having it start here. The athletes that were so single track too from an early age, just like the burnout they have, there's just
yeah,
like no joy.
yeah,
And what stands out to me in the research around grit is that the best thing you can do as a coach or a parent for a young person to make them gritty is to foster the love of the game.
totally.
Like if, we build that capacity, then you're willing to go do all these hard things to like tap into it again.
I like going even a step deeper for just like who do they want to be as a person, and I think like making it really, really clear. Like my older daughter does volleyball, my younger daughter does jujitsu. It's not about either
Yeah.
one, but I've had tons of arguments with both of them. But like for sure, love of what they're doing. But even at that age, they're not going to love it every day, and that's
Yeah.
totally fine. But what I do want them to get in tune is like, okay, what what are you going to do if you don't go to practice today? Like and then okay,
Yeah.
and then my wife is actually great at this, but like, what's the better choice? Okay, you do whatever you think makes you who you want to be, and then
Oh shit. Oh
but
shit. I need
what
that.
but I
Give me
try to make
Crystal's number.
yeah, seriously. But we try to make it like really clear, like it's not like you can quit volleyball or jiu-jitsu tomorrow as long as it's for the
Yeah.
right reasons.
Right.
But if you're gonna just sit on the couch and I mean, it's one of those funny moments. But even my youngest, when she was even younger, I remember one time she's yelling on the couch like, "I just want a comfortable life. I just want to." It's like you can't get mad at that. That is so honest, right?
Dude,
Uh,
welcome to being human. That's
yeah.
so funny.
What I do want them getting in tune with is like, okay, fine. You don't have to do it. It is not about that. What it is about is like, do you want to be this or do you want to be that?
Yeah.
And fortunately, we've had a couple of times where they've doubled down, like, I,
Yeah.
and
You're like, all right,
then it's
well,
like, what? All right, what do we do now?
I want to be a quitter.
But I
God,
think
it's so
if
good.
anything, it's not going to feel fun every day. Now,
Yeah.
again, like the younger they go, the more fun it should be.
Sure.
100%. I'm not saying make
No,
them
that's a good
grind through it,
distinction, though. You're right.
but yeah, yeah,
Because it's, yeah. I want to be respectful of your time. So, two more questions.
yeah.
If you, what's your biggest hope for every young athlete in the country?
I wish for the sport to reach the level of public awareness that I believe it's already at, but I wish for every player to approach it the way men's volleyball got great in the 80s. When just a bunch of random guys were playing indoors and beach all the time and ended up winning 3 gold medals, and
Yeah.
just out of nowhere. So like I don't think that group of men's players, I don't think they would have done what they did without like the level of sincere passion they had for it. They wanted to do it. Like they wanted to play. The game itself was the motivation, right? Um, but we've also reached a level of popularity where women's volleyball is in this really not necessarily positive space where it's this huge sport, but it's being treated as a minor sport, and that just over time, that's just not going to work, you know.
Yeah.
So, but what I don't want is for it to reach the level it deserves and just have it be all the externally based stuff that we're talking about. But
Right.
if I could wave my volleyball utopia wand, it'd be for the sport to have the level it deserves with the approach that really kind of started it all in the 80s.
Yeah. And then lastly, what do you hope every youth volleyball coach in the country understood a little bit better?
I think there's some really basic, easy to understand science that I just think we're being a little irrational about. Like, so, I mean, this research is so old, and like, you know, once things start getting boiled down to bite-sized chunks, it's probably been pretty well processed. You know,
Yeah.
like there's some stuff right now, and there's some really good stuff going on right now, but you can tell by how wordy everyone's being that like we're not quite there yet. You know, but like, but
Good point.
there's some really clear because it started like 100 years ago. So, if you want to get good at something, you need to do that. Like not something that doesn't look like that. Like, so
Right.
if you want to get better at volleyball, you have got to play a volleyball. You got to play volleyball. And if the drill isn't 6-on-6, then it still needs to resemble that. And if it doesn't, you're not doing it anymore. So I think that would be like my biggest guiding light for practice. And then for feedback, keep it to 3 to 5 words and ask questions at least 2/3 of the time, and you're going to have a great practice. Like you just will,
Wow.
you know?
Yeah.
So I think those are like the 3 things I would try to, I mean, if I could teach to everyone, I like not just teach it, but like have people accept it, you know,
Totally.
that's what I would do. Yeah.
I love it. Well, we're way over time, but I love you. I feel like lit up and better every time I get to have a conversation with you. So thank you for being here, and thanks for everything you do for our sport and for all the people that you get to hang out with.
No, I love you too. Like I said, you're part of the family, and super grateful for the time, and really grateful, crazy stoked for the position you have in our sport right now and what you're going to do. So we are all very lucky that you're in the position you're in. So
No,
keep doing
thank
it.
you. You got to keep those
Yeah.
gloves up. Let's go.
That's right.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in to Beyond the Court. And thanks to our guest, Tom Black, for joining us today. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. And to learn more about League One Volleyball, follow us on Instagram at LOVB. In the meantime, keep working hard, having fun, and go on and spread the love today. We'll see you next time.